After exploring all 7 continents, humanity as a collective came to a singular conclusion.
This world sucks!
This led to the creation of Isekai, or, as translated, Japan's cash cow. Since the success of the first Isekai, that time my father reincarnated me into another world to defeat the Demon King, Japan began mass producing them, to the point that it's become Japan's #1 export, even overtaking Pokemon furry art. To better understand Isekai, I've spent the past week doing nothing but watching Isekai to create a guide to help you understand the complex subject that is Isekai. In the sea of anime that gets released every season, what can an Isekai do to stand out from the competition? Have a compelling story? Great visuals? Well-written characters? Wrong! It's by having a title that sounds like it was created by a crackhead trying to reach a word count. Since most isekai originate from light novels on the website Shosetsuka ni Naro, it's important to have outrageous concepts to get people to read them. Because who would read Overlord when I could read I'm a behemoth, an S-ranked monster, but mistaken for a cat. I live as an elf girl's pet. A wise man once said, people die if they are killed. However, after applying the scientific method, we have disproved this statement due to the existence of an all-powerful entity, Isekai Protagonist. Although this may look like a family gathering, the only thing that they have in common is that they keep it in the family. And just about everything else. Pre-Isekai, the protagonist is either a NEET, gamer, or works at Mappa Studio, typically having the personality of a block of wood, while looking like the equivalent of the generational Pikachu clones. This is so that the viewer can self-insert themselves in, since escapism is a compelling factor of Isekai. Because we all know Isekai's target audience. Protagonist is then isekai'd by dying from overwork, being trapped in a video game, Truck-kun, down these stairs, or by being summoned to another world.
Because the prophecy said the hero who would save the world
Would be a Genshin Impact player. The protagonist does of course come from the only place on Earth, Japan, and, luckily for our main character, in this unknown world, everyone speaks the universal language of English subtitles. Now in another world, we need to give them a quirk, such as bringing an item from our world, using knowledge from our world, or being reincarnated into something strange. They can spawn in at 4 different levels. Human who never gets powers, starts out weak but becomes overpowered, starts overpowered, in Kirito.
Because he's just so cool!
Isekai Worlds are deeply rooted in MMORPGs, with most of them having the same power system, which is why you can skip the first episode of every Isekai. Or all of it. After arriving, the protagonist grinds out all of the side quests, getting the most overpowered abilities before starting the main storyline. All isekai must also have the protagonist join the Adventurers Guild, but upon arrival, they're stopped by some guy who looks like a biker gang reject who challenges them. The protagonist then joins the guild, taking missions that they're clearly overqualified for, and traveling to other realms for the sole purpose of expanding their knowledge of the local wildlife. Other than your generic town setting, isekai can also take place in the most interesting place that one could imagine. Your local high school. It is important to remember that these are fantasy worlds of magic and wonder, only limited by an author's imagination, which is why every world should be unique, and definitely not all take place in the 1700s. So slavery is a prominent plot point in just about every isekai, because how are we gonna show the protagonist is a good person if he doesn't free slaves? What? He doesn't free them? He buys them? Sometimes they buy him. With all of them developing Stockholm Syndrome? But since the protagonist is meant to be a self-insert, I guess the author thought the only way imaginable for its audience to get a girl was like this. However, we live in an ever-evolving world. We have self-driving cars, got the first image of a black hole, and have even discovered the cure for cancer, as well as the cause. Which is why I'm sure, in our progressing society, that the trope of slavery will go away. Huh? What's this? New isekai just got announced. Main character gets kicked out of his party, so he decides to take revenge by buying their mothers from the slave market? Oh. Side characters are a fundamental part of every story, adding stakes, revealing key details of the world, and progressing the main character's development. This statement is actually true for isekai. but there is one variable present that can affect it, which I call the Doki Doki principle. Side characters in isekai are interesting, unique characters until they fall in love with the protagonist, causing them to melt into a pair of boobs with 4 lines of dialogue. This effect is so prevalent due to the extensive use of harems in isekai. Each harem has a variety of characters, some of which you may have seen, such as the royal elf, enslaved demi-human, tsundere loli, and the peak of human creation. Before joining the harem, some of these characters must be defeated in combat. After being defeated, they immediately lose all power, serving as much purpose as Sleeping Beauty did in Season 2. Aside from the harem, there are numerous other side characters that can be categorized as good or evil by playing a good old game of smash or pass. Rich noble who looks like he woke up and chose diabetes. Pass. The king who looks like he's one day away from retiring permanently. Pass. The Pope or High Priest. Now, this is where it starts to get difficult. But if you look at the images long enough, you'll come to the realization that one is in fact wearing glasses. Smash and pass. The Demon Lord, the end goal of most isekai protagonists, is defeating this entity, saving the world, making this by far the most difficult one to figure out, because you may expect this just for it to transform into a lolly and join the harem. FBI. Finally, the main character's sister. This one should be a no-brainer. What? Then there are side characters who fall under the category of characters who exist. You have the shopkeepers, dwarf blacksmiths, CGI monsters who exist to be killed, and guild girls who give better customer service than Chick-fil-A. There is also a chance that other humans are isekai'd alongside the protagonist who simply exist to act as comparisons. While they are moderately successful individuals, the protagonist is the cousin that they get compared to, who graduated from Harvard and did World War III and is a professional pianist at the age of 9. While the females of the group have a chance to join the harem, being graced with a singular personality trait, the guys, can you name a single one you remember? Aside from Klein. Then you have the variations of the genre, parody isekai and reverse isekai. A reverse isekai takes someone from another world and brings them to Japan, which is conveniently the dream of every anime fan with no life, which is every anime fan. But just because they take place in our world doesn't mean they're not just as action-packed and as interesting as a regular isekai.
いらっしゃいませ。ご注文はお決まりですか?
Parody isekai deconstructs the isekai genre and turns it into a joke, which isn't too difficult because it does that by itself. Now, for one to fully complete the path of isekai, the final step that they must conquer is parody isekai. Only after collecting the knowledge of all isekai can one truly appreciate its humor. While many who have reached this stage call themselves the Ascended Ones, we refer to them as psychiatric patients. While most people who have never watched isekai may be wondering, why do you watch it? Well, we have all as a community collectively gaslit ourselves into believing that isekai is actually kinda good, but in reality, isekai kinda bad. Oh, comedy has peaked. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some phenomenal anime in the genre, like the greatest isekai of all time, Kuma 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 Bear. However, it is important to highlight the one flaw of isekai. It exists. But also, much like the comments I get from light novel readers saying that the light novel is better, they never end. This is due to them either getting put into the never getting another season box, or simply because the light novel that it's based on hasn't ended. Luckily for the isekai genre, it has one thing going for it that makes this fact obsolete. Isekai fans have nothing better to do than wait. Many have complained that there are too many bad isekai, that the market is oversaturated. But I must remind you of the law of equivalent exchange. For every good isekai, there must also be 100 Arifuretas. Hello, have you heard of our Lord and Savior Yuna from hit show Kuma 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 Bear, the greatest anime known in existence? Now, to join our cult, all you have to do is undergo the Kumification process, which requires you to watch Kuma 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 Bear 100 times without stopping. So be sure to sign up today.